Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the program. As always, I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you've never checked us out before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast. Today, we have an interview for you on the studio line. With me right now is Terry Whalin. Terry, thank you for being here.
Billy, I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you today.
Well, awesome. Now you're all smiles over there. I mean, that's good. That's a good way to start. If I got to tell you, a lot of times when we do these specialty, this is about publishing. And a lot of times when we do these specialty things, sometimes podcasters worry, if you're not in this niche, you're not going to listen to it. The audiences are going to listen to it. And that generally doesn't happen. I think if you have an interest in books, if you have an interest in media today, how stories get told, all these other things, there's a changing media landscape across the board. Okay. And I think it's really helpful to be aware of some of these things. And we're going to talk about publishing today. Terry understands both sides of the editorial desk as an editor and a writer. He worked as a magazine editor, and his magazine work has appeared in more than 50 publications. He has written more than 60 books through traditional publishers in a wide range of topics, from children's books to biographies to co-authored books. Terry's new book, which I alluded to, is 10 Publishing Myths, Insights Every Author Needs to Succeed. All right. Publishing myths. That's one. Let me guess. Everybody thinks they're going to be a Stephen King their first time out. Is that right?
Yeah, that's why I wrote this book, Billy, is because basically I talk to authors all the time as an acquisitions editor, and many of those people have completely unrealistic expectations as far as what's going to happen with their book, because so much of the publishing process is outside of anything that I can control as an author. I mean, I can't make a bookstore buy your book. I can't make them carry it. I can't make a reader go in there and buy your book. I mean, the older I get, I've learned kind of the hard way here that there's only one person on the planet that I have any control over at all, and that's me.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm with you there. There's only so much you can, and I got to tell you, the expectations. I do a lot of media work, and somebody starts a podcast, somebody decides they're going to do some videos online, whatever. They always think they're going to get these explosive, immediate results, and it just doesn't work that way. It just absolutely doesn't work that way. How did you get your whole life now? You've obviously been a writer, been around it. Have you always had the writing bug, so to speak? Has that always been in your blood?
Well, in a way it has. It was actually a high school English teacher that noticed something in my writing. I don't have any idea, but he encouraged me to join the high school newspaper, which I did. In my senior year, I became the editor of that paper. I decided to study journalism. I went to Indiana University. There are 30,000 students on the main campus there. And I plunged right into it. I joined the campus newspaper. We had a full-size newspaper we were producing 6 days a week. There are about 100 of us on the writing staff. And I joined a social fraternity. Mm-hmm. I'd been out drinking the night before. I couldn't get my fingers on the right keys. This is in the pre-computer days. Yeah. And whenever I made a mistake, you basically backed up and X'd out. And I knew my editor would be yelling at me because my copy wasn't going to look very good. And so every time I made a mistake, I said to myself, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And this little blonde-haired girl that was sitting next to me, she said, "Oh, Terry, don't say that, because one of these days when you really need Jesus, you'll call out for him and he won't be there." And I thought, what is this? I'm a Christian. I go to church when I'm at home. I read the Bible in church when I'm at home. To be honest, Billy, at that time, I knew nothing about Jesus. And so she encouraged me to go to this little bookstore, a couple blocks off the Indiana campus. They had pretty cards and posters. Maybe I'd find a book that interested me.
Mm-hmm.
So I wandered down there a couple of days later, and I bought this book called Jesus the Revolutionary. I thought, how in the world could Jesus be a revolutionary? And so I took that book back to my room and read that. It showed me a different side of Jesus than I'd ever seen before. And about that time, some people invited me to this Jesus People gathering in downtown Bloomington. And so I went, and we were all sitting on little scraps of carpets with little candles lit. And those people in that room had something that I didn't have. And so I got a Bible, and I've been going the Jesus trail with my life ever since. My journalism colleagues thought I was nuts because we were all training, to be like a big newspaper reporter, at the Indianapolis Star, the Chicago Tribune, or one of those kind of places.
Yeah.
Instead, I joined this group called Wycliffe Bible Translators. And so I trooped off to Guatemala, Central America. I worked among the Southwest Cachiquel people, spent 10 years of my life in linguistics. But then I did return to my writing. And I actually was at a writers' conference. I always encourage writers to go to conferences because you may meet somebody that's really significant for you in that whole experience. And so one of these conferences, and the editor said, "Terry, I have a problem." And I always listen when they tell me they have some problem. And she said, "Look, I'm a children's acquisitions editor, and we're supposed to have books to help our kids know that there's a big world out there that they need to be involved in. We don't have a single book that has that kind of message. What kind of ideas do you have?" Well, at that time, my kids were little, and so I was reading a lot of picture books to kids, and I knew that Stephen Lawhead, who writes fantasy, also had a set of children's books that he did called Howard Had a Hot Air Balloon, Howard Had a Spaceship. And so I said, these books by Steve Lawhead combined real pictures with a little cartoon character. And I said, what if we took a cartoon character and combined it with our real pictures from around the world at Wycliffe to show kids that they could do different occupations? She said, "Oh, that's a good idea. Write that up and send that to me." And so I made a little note. I went home and wrote it up. And that ultimately became my first book that was published in 1992, a little children's book called When I Grow Up, I Can Go Anywhere for Jesus. And so that's what started me sort of on this book road. And like I say, I've written for magazines and written a lot of books through the years. It's been great opportunities. I try to seize them. When I see the opportunity, I try to seize it and do it.
When you and now you say you have you have 10 myths in your book. As the years went along, did you just make a list of them, or did you, when you got the idea for the book, did you sit down and just think through the years? How did you come up with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I talk to new writers all the time, and they're always telling me these things. And so I just made a few little notes, and I just came up with 10. 10 was a round number, so that's where I came up with that. As I was putting the book together, I got endorsements for the book, and Alice Kreider, who's an acquisitions editor, when she sent back her endorsement to me, she said, "Terry, you're missing the 11th myth." I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll bite. Alice, what's the 11th myth?" She said, "Well, the 11th myth should be that if I send my book to Oprah Winfrey, she'll book me on her show." And I'm like, "Oh, now that's a really good myth." And so I thought, as I was writing the book, I thought, I'm going to write that chapter. And so we designed that chapter to look exactly like the rest of the book. And people can get that chapter from me for free. All they do is they go to terrylinks.com /11th myth, 11th myth. And then they put their first name and email address in, and you get that chapter completely free from me.
Oh, that's awesome. You talk about, and everybody's got their talking points. I know one of your talking points is, why an author has great passion for their book. I would probably just walk that back just one notch, and I'll tell you why. Because I've worked with a lot of creators. Okay, I've worked with over the years. I've been doing professional audio back in the days when we used to record on this ribbon. It was called tape.
Yeah, I remember.
Yes, and I would drive around, going to different radio stations, dropping off they're called half tracks. They would become carts when they got to the radio station, and they would load them in a little slot. So I've been doing this a long time, and I've been managing expectations for a long time. And generally, now that we're in the digital realm and podcasts are kind of pseudo internet radio programs, I have generally found that the people come to me that want production help for producing a podcast or something like that, if their passion is the podcast and the medium, they have a tendency to do a little better. And what I mean by that is what's the best microphone I use? What do I do this? How do I edit this? Whereas when people say, somebody tells them, yeah, you got to do a podcast. Okay. So they get a bunch of list of stuff together and they don't take the approach seriously. They sit in front of their laptop, speak into the front of the laptop without any, not helping the sound at all, not doing this and that. And it sounds like a Zoom call. And, I try to tell them that and they say, well, it works fine. And they don't get it. And I kind of think I'm suspecting that when you have an author who is approaching this as fame, as getting on TV shows, as selling it into a movie, that approach isn't the same as somebody who's got a passion for storytelling, who's got a passion for something that's in their blood. They just are a natural born storyteller. Even when they're at a party, they can captivate the room with some kind of a story. What is your angle on that? How do you manage the proper approach to writing a book and publishing?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, as an editor, I've looked at thousands of submissions here, and I can basically tell, skimming a page or two, whether a person is really going to be like you say, a storyteller, somebody that really can put together something that's going to captivate people. And some are, and some aren't. And if they aren't, then they're going to need a little deeper editorial help from somebody to help them add those stories in there, because at the end of the day, that's what we remember, is we'll remember those stories more than the how-to information, probably.
Yeah, that's correct. For the novice writer, and here again, we get a lot of people that are very enthusiastic about writing stories. And I'll tell you, for me anyway, the audience has kind of merged. I was on a track there of getting a lot of people who had trauma and stories. Either they had been through some sort of a trauma, somebody did harm to them, or they overcame a serious illness or an accident or something. And a lot of these people wrote books. So these two things kind of merged. And I think I talked to a lot of people that really want to help people with their story. So it's very important to them. But they're novices. And as a novice, what is the most important thing you should remember going into this as a novice?
One of the important things I think for a novice to remember is that you can get a lot of practice before you even do your book. I mean, everybody wants to do a book. I get that. But here's the real numbers from my perspective, Billy, is if your book sells 5,000 copies during the lifetime of the book, that's a good number. Mm-hmm. There's another realm, and that's why I've written for more than 50 magazines through the years, because with a magazine article, it's very easy to reach 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people with your article. And that article is really great storytelling training, because almost every magazine will take a personal experience story. Mm-hmm. And so, writing a magazine article, you learn how to have a good title, how to have a good opening paragraph, how to have a beginning, a middle, an end, how to have what we call a takeaway, a point to that article, why the reader should be interested in that. And, if you write 15 or 20 of those personal experience magazine articles. And if they're on similar kind of topics, they could be chapters for your book. So it's all a matter of kind of being strategic, practicing through those magazine articles and getting those published. And as editors, it's kind of crazy, but we look for people to publish that have been published. And so by you publishing in magazine articles, you're really making yourself more attractive to agents, and editors will be more interested in your stuff.
What do you think about, as far as, I know we're going to talk about a platform here, and I hope I'm not leading into the next point by accident, but you touched on something as far as building a reservoir of content that people can find. What do you think of like Substack and all these other things? Should an author be, let's say, writing a blog about the subject of the book, and just where people can get little bits of information? It's actually called content marketing, right? You give people little pieces of stuff. You establish yourself as a source of good information, and then they take the next step to buy your book or subscribe to your podcast or whatever. So are those kind of things like Substack and other things, are those working to supplement an author's visibility?
Absolutely. Okay. It's a very wise thing. I actually got in on the early days of blogging. And so I actually had this little device that goes out there and searches for my name if it finds it out there anywhere. And I found this article a little over a year ago that said there were over 600 million blogs that are out there. But this article listed the top 27 content producers. And they were people like, Seth Godin and Ryan Holiday and Jeff Goins, people like that. But my name was one of those top 27 content producers.
Wow.
And it's not that I've been doing anything magical here at all, Billy, but I've been blogging consistently since 2004. So my blog has over 1,700 entries in it. That's a lot of content, know. Sure. And so basically they had me for that, and I'm still blogging every week. I have an email list, and I have maybe 400 people to get my blog on their email on Monday mornings. And so I like writing those things, and I'm still writing them. And I actually, early on, I took some of my blog content and I organized that into a book. In the business, we call that a book. So my Jumpstart Your Publishing Dreams book originally started as a series of blog posts that I was doing. So you could take your Substack material, you could take your blog post, you could take your magazine articles. They can all be fodder that you can use in your book. I mean, it's just another way of multiplying what you're doing and getting out there that a lot of people don't even think about.
Exactly. I don't have near the credit that you do for book, marketing, but I can tell you as a general practitioner of marketing, I can tell you that content marketing is very important, because it used to be, let's say you're painting your back porch and you want to know what kind of paint to use to be weather resistant, right? Sure. And you would go down to the hardware store, and you'd walk into the hardware store, and some people still do this, and they go to the paint department and they ask somebody. That still happens, but what is more likely is they're going to be sitting around in their kitchenette there, and they're going to open their phone, and they're going to say, what kind of paint works on outdoor deck? And they're going to hit search, or they're going to ask AI now, which I'm going to get to in a minute. And your results should come up. If you are that local store, you should have a little, in springtime, let's refresh your deck. Here's what we're going to do, all that kind of stuff, because people find that stuff, and then that leads them to you. And that is so important with no matter what you're doing. And I would guess that book publishing is no different.
No different.
Good, simple answer. Awesome. I alluded to the word platform, and then, that's something that gets tossed around all the time. And here again, as a general marketing person, I hear that term all the time. What is a platform?
A platform is basically your connection to the readers, whether that be through through a social media platform, through your blog, through your newsletter? What is your reach really to readers at the end of the day? And the more you have, the better. The more that you're going to get literary agents and publishers really interested in your work. There's a lot of books being published every day here, Billy, and so publishers have a high standard. Traditional publishers, especially, have a high standard of who they're looking for, because at the end of the day, these editors are accountable to their own people, and they have to sell some books with these people they're choosing and bringing into the publishing company.
Interesting. Let me wrap up. I got two more things that I really want to ask you before we go. Before I get to one that's kind of a curveball, let me get to the more standard question. When you have an idea for a book, when you have your book done, when you're ready to start, how do I get my book out there? When you get to that point, what are the first publishing options you should be thinking about? We hear so much about indie publications now. We hear so much about going to a traditional publisher. What are your options?
Yeah, there's basically three options. There's traditional publishing, where you basically have to find a literary agent in order to be able to shop your material for you. That traditional publisher will control everything. They'll take over your rights, all kinds of things there. That's one way to go, and you could spend a lot of time doing that, pursuing that kind of option if you want to. At the other end of the spectrum is self-publishing, where you do it all yourself. You find somebody to design the cover and the interior and get your book out there, but it's basically on your own website, and Amazon is your options there. The third option, and one option that I would encourage your listeners to pursue, is really independent publishing, like we do at Morgan James Publishing. I mean, it's a very different model, but we've been around 21 years. We've sold 20 million books. We've produced over 6,000 titles. We've been on the New York Times list 29 different times, the Wall Street Journal bestseller list over 200 times. And you really can't do that sort of thing if you're not selling books inside the brick and mortar bookstores, which we are. So I encourage people to look at that option as something to consider in this process. Send it to me if they want to. They can send it to Terry at morganjamespublishing.com. I'm actively looking. Now, we receive 5,000 submissions a year, Billy, so I get a lot of material coming my direction. And we only do a couple hundred books a year. But even with that type of situation, I am always actively looking for the right person and the right author.
Interesting. All right, I'm going to say the name of the book before I want to tell the audience, don't go nowhere, because I'm going to ask him a real zinger now. Here again, the author is Terry Whalin, and the book is 10 Publishing Myths, Insights Every Author Needs to Succeed. Here's the 1,000-pound gorilla, not the 800 one, the 1,000-pound gorilla.
Okay.
I'm going to say that AI is going to cause a little bit of a disruption in what you guys do on a number of different levels. It used to be that publishers like you had to watch out for plagiarism. Okay. And now I'm guessing you guys got to watch out for a lot of stuff that's in the book that wasn't necessarily written by the author or was aided too much by AI. And then you have the other side of the coin, which at some point, when are books going to write themselves? And as a creative, my opinion on that is as it stands, I feel that a lot of the digital, the AI tools that I use are good for busy work. For example, taking a program like this and chopping up into little pieces for social media clips and things like that's busy work. And that's something that AI can do because it follows a pattern. Establishing a shot, let's say, when I'm doing video or somebody's making a movie, and having a creative thought. That's probably something that AI cannot step in and do. Something that Steven Spielberg would envision at this point, from the ground up, from its inception, is probably at this time not what people are worried about. But I think that when you're someone like yourself, especially research, I have a feeling a lot of people could take a shortcut. When they're writing a book about, they're writing a novel about, some spy in Germany, and rather than research what the governmental laws are and things like that in Germany, they just ask AI. And so how are you, as someone who is managing creatives, looking out for what AI is going to do in terms of disturbing what the authors have traditionally always done in the past?
Well, that's a $64,000 question. That's really hard to answer. I mean, there are programs out there that will analyze something and say whether it's taken from somewhere else. Really analyze the plagiarism type things, and you want to be careful, and you want to be aware that there are those resources that can trip you up as a writer, because you don't want to be accused of plagiarism by any means. So I agree with you, Billy, that you want to use AI for your busy work, your routine kinds of things, but you don't want to lean on it too heavily, I think, at the end of the day, because you as a creative and as a writer have to develop your own storytelling muscle that you really use over and over with your material to get it out there in the best way at the end of the day.
I know there's people in Hollywood. I got some friends out there. Hollywood's been going through some changes. One of the things is that animation and things like that is being outsourced now. It used to be that was all done in the United States. And there's a lot of that going on, like say from India and stuff like that now. The next thing that a lot of people in Hollywood are worried about is the fact that creatives could actually be replaced. I think that was one of the big issues for the actor strike here a while back.
Sure.
That you could actually have a non-human, taking the image of an actor, especially in regard to, let's say, extras in the background. That you don't have to pay extras. You don't have to have a wardrobe for all these people. You don't have to have any of that stuff. Is there a danger of from that end? Is there a danger that creatives will largely be replaced? Let's say you have a company that does have a need for a certain book, for a certain subject matter, and rather to try to find one, like you had mentioned in one of your stories, they say, you know what, let's just tell AI what we want and design a book. Do you think that is a legitimate fear?
I think it's a fear. I don't know how much that's happening out there. So maybe I'm naive, Billy, at the end of the day. Maybe it is going on a lot more than what I realize, but I'm still the old-fashioned guy that believes in story and experiences and capturing those experiences into books that help people out there. So that's kind of what I'm doing at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm going to say that the personal experience in the books is something that is obviously a personal experience is never going to be replaced. And I'm thinking that there's something really magical about writing a book, in my opinion. Whether you're typing on a keyboard or whether you're physically writing, I'll ask you that. I think there's a certain magic that happens there that you don't get from dictation. I don't know what it is, but there's something about you seeing the words that you're writing, you're formulating an idea, and then you read it back and it hits you a certain way and you continue on to mold that thought. There's a certain process that doesn't happen with dictation. It's actually the writing, whether it's typing on a keyboard or whether it's writing with the pen. Would you agree with me on that? That is a human...
I totally agree with you on that. For example, I'm a big fan of Daniel Silva, who writes one novel a year that's about 400 pages, and it's a page turner novel. But I've listened to Daniel talk about his writing process and what he does. He has some sort of special legal pad and pen that he uses, and some socks that he wears or something like this. But he does it lying on his stomach in his office on the carpet to start to tell these stories. He writes them by hand, and then he takes those pages to his computer and types them into his computer. So he's kind of got this process down. And every time Daniel Silva releases a book, it's at the top of the New York Times list. So obviously this guy's got a technique that's working for him year after year.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Working with creatives myself, they have this energy, they have this idea, but you still have to channel it into something that's practical. Yet it has to be a method that's practical to get that creativity out. And that's why something like this book, 10 Publishing Myths, Insights Every Author Needs to Succeed. That's Morgan James Publishing, and the author is Terry Whalin. Where can people find you, Terry?
Well, that's a great question there, Billy. I really have tried to make it super easy for people to get this book, because if they go to a website that I've set up called at publishingoffer.com, that's publishingoffer.com, you can get this book for only $10, and that includes the shipping along with over $200 worth of bonuses. And I really tried to make it easy for people to get this book because of the practical nature of it. And I really want to help as many people as I can out there to get this book and help them to get into this business in the right kind of way so that they can succeed.
That is absolutely fantastic. Terry Whalin. Terry, thank you so much for coming on the program. It's very entertaining and informative. So appreciate you.
Thank you, Billy. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, you're very welcome. My name is Billy Dees. You can find the Billy Dees podcast just about anywhere podcasts are found. We have about a 10-year history on all the major platforms. And as far as social media goes, I'm on most of them, but I got to say X, the former Twitter, that's kind of like my social media home. There's a good writing community on there. There's a good podcast community. And I got to tell you, those two things go together like peanut butter and chocolate. People like to hear podcasts about books and authors and all that stuff. So that's worked out very well. Thank you very much for listening to the program, and we will talk to you again very, very soon.
Thank you for listening to the Billy Dees podcast. Follow Billy Dees on X @BillyDees for updates about the program.
Do you listen to music or audiobooks on streaming devices such as Sonos or Amazon speakers? How about on your car sound system? If you use Spotify, Audible, or Amazon Music on any of these systems, you can also listen to the Billy Dees podcast the same way. Billy and his team go the extra mile to make sure our podcasts sound as good or better than anything on the radio. Listening to the Billy Dees podcast has never been easier. You literally just have to ask.